All right, so we'll say good morning. Let us begin by thanking our sponsor, Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Tammuz, Adam and Yudit Benzev, for dedicating all the Shur and Drushos this month in honor of their children, Jake Sarina and Rosie. To thank our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Rabbi Larry and Florence Ziffer, in memory of Larry's father, Pinchas ben Yosef Elimelech, Zichron Livracha. We hope that on the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshama will have an Aliyah and the family in Nechama. And to thank our Daf Yomi sponsors, Mr. and Mrs. Yehuda Buchwalter, on the occasion of the birth of a daughter to their children, Nachum and Leah Rivka Mand. Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov Yehuda, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, B'Shevizocha, Legad LeTorah, L'Chuppah L'Maisim Tovim. Mazel Tov. Incredible. What a way to start the day. Baruch Hashem. All right, with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Ayin Aleph 71, and we are picking up on the bottom of Ayin Amud Beis 70b. Literally 2 lines up from the bottom. Kidesh Yadav V'Raglav. So also remember again the Mishnah continuing through the Avoda of Yom Kippur. And interestingly enough, one of the fascinating facts that came out of yesterday's Mishnah, although I guess intellectually we knew it, it's interesting to see it in print, is this idea that the Kohen Gadol left the kaf and the machta inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Right? Remember again when he did the Ketores, the incense offering, he left the ladle and the fire pan inside of the Holy of Holies. Because remember again, the Kodesh HaKadoshim has to fill with smoke. That's part of the avoda of the day. And then again, the Mishnah highlighted, he goes back in to go ahead and retrieve them. So says the Gemara, Tan Rabbanan, we learned in a Braisa, Uba Aaron al Oha Moed. Aaron comes to the Oha Moed, to the Mishkan. Lama Huba, why does he come to the Oha Moed? So we'll say, so again, the pasuk, the way the pasuk that's quoted is, Uba Aaron al Oha Moed. Aaron will come to the Oha Moed. Upashat es bigdi habada shalabash beva osham alakodesh v'nicham sham. So we'll say, so it's interesting that why does the Torah relate that Aaron is coming back to the Oha Moed? Why? So the Gemara says, Lama huba lahotzi es hakaf v'es hamachta. Interestingly enough, to go ahead and remove the ladle and the fire pan from the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He's coming back in to remove the utensils. Top of Ayin Aleph. Here's what's unique about this pasuk. Shekala parsha kula ne'amra ala seder, because it was the entire rest of the section of the Avodah of Yom Kippur is written in the proper chronological order. Chutz mi pasuk zeh. Both say the exception is this one pasuk, which is written out of order. So the Gemara says, "My time." So how do you know that it's written out of order? From where do you see that? Amrav Chisda. Both say, listen to this. So Gemiri. Chamish tevilos va'asara kiddushin tova kohen gadol or mekadesh b'bayom. Because we actually had this in the beginning of the Masechta, that over the course of the avodah of Yom Kippur, the kohen gadol goes to the mikvah 5 times, and there are 10 kiddushin. Right, 10 kiddushin meaning 10 times he sanctifies his hands and feet. Now both say those 2 numbers are related. Right? Why those 2 numbers related? Because every time you go to the mikvah, what happens? There's kiddush adayim raglayim before and after. Okay, so therefore 5 immersions equals 10 kiddushin. So the Gemara says, Tova kohen gadol. Chamish tevilos v'asar kiddushin. Tova kohen gadol umekadesh bo bayom. So kohen gadol goes to the mikvah 5 times and does 10 kiddushin yadayim v'raglayim 10 times throughout the day. V'i amrit kisidron ksivi. Now we'll say the Gemara says, if you read the psukim and you read the order as it is written, lo mishkachos lo elo shalosh tevilos v'shisha kiddushin. The problem is you'll only come out with 3 immersions and 6 kiddushin. Therefore, it must be that this particular phrase uba Aaron al Oha Moed is written out of order. Maskev Rabbi Zira v'dilma mafsik le b'seir hanaaseh b'chutz. Maybe halacha l'maaseh interrupts the service with the seir that's done outside. Look at Rashi. B'seir naaseh b'chutz. Rashi says, Kidichsiv. Okay, there's another. Okay, let's see Rashi. B'seir naaseh b'chutz. Kidichsiv milvant chatasa kippurim v'eino kosov kan aval elo ve'elaam dafka kasinu kra. So ultimately, again, perhaps halacha l'maisa, the soyer hanasa b'chutz is done, right? Interrupts the order. Amrabai Amrakra, the yatsa va'asa es olaso. The pasuk says he will go out and perform his olah. Miyitzia rishona avid elo ve'elaam. From the time he goes out the first time, that's when he performs ultimately his ayol and the ayol of the nation. Rava Amar, Rava says, Amrakra, the pasuk says, upashat as bigdei habad. The pasuk says he will take off the linen clothing. She'in tamud lomar asher lavash, because we'll say the pasuk reads, upashat as bigdei habad asher lavash. He will take off the linen clothing that he wore. So the Gemara says that phrase asher lavash that he wore is unnecessary. Klom adam poshet ela masha lovesh. We'll say a person could only take off what? That which he was wearing. Ela ma tamud lomar asher lavash. Rather, what does it mean when it says asher lavash? Shalavash kvar, that which he was wearing already, indicating again a prior part of the service. Maskiv la Rava barav shila ve'ima dimafsikle bisar hanasa b'chutz. Maybe we quote unquote interrupt the avoda that's done in Big Day Lavan with the seir that's done outside. Haksiv vayatza va'asa. Pasuk says he will go out and he will perform. The Chala Parsha Kula Ne'amra Ala Seder. Now, is that to say that the rest of the Parsha, aside from this, is written in the chronological order? Va'kroi ksivi. But the Pesukim say as follows: as Chilav HaChatos Yaktir HaMizbecha. The pasuk says the Chilav HaChatos, you will go ahead and offer up on the Mizbeach. V'hadar Ves Parachatos Ves Sirachatos. And then it says the Parachatos and the Sirachatos. V'ilu Anantanan. And Rabbi said we learned in yesterday's Mishnah, or our Shabbos' Mishnah, Haroa es kohen gadol kishu kore, eino roa parvesar nesrafin. Here Rabbi said we learned that halacha lamaisa, if you saw the kohen gadol doing the kriyas haTorah, you were unable to see the par and the sa'ir being burned. Ve'ilu emurei chatos basar hachi maktir lehu. But yet at the end of the day, the limbs of the chatos were burned afterwards. Rather, what you have to say is, it's not just only this particular pasuk of the kohen going ahead and retrieving the kaf and the machta from the Kodesh HaKadoshim that is out of order. Rather, from this pasuk forward, many of the avodos that are mentioned are not mentioned in a chronological order. So the Gemara says, so we'll say, so again, just to point out, all the Gemara is pointing out over here, both say, is up until this particular pasuk, the avoda of Yom Kippur, as written in the Torah, was as actually executed in the Mikdash. So in other words, it followed a specific chronological order. This pasuk, from this pasuk forward, we have a number of things just that are not written in chronological order. That's all that the Gemara is trying to highlight over here. Umay chazis dimishabeshes kroi shabish masnisa. So we'll say this is very interesting. Now here's what's happening over here. The reason the Gemara is saying that the Pesukim are written out of order, listen to how fascinating this is. The reason the Gemara is saying that the Pesukim are written out of order is because that the order of the Pesukim doesn't match the order of the Mishnah. Right? Remember, I was saying yesterday's daf, we saw the Rambam Paskin like Rabbi Akiva in the order of the Avoda. Interestingly enough, what the Gemara is highlighting is that the order of the Mishnah does not match the order of the Pesukim, which then leads the Gemara to say that what? That the order of the Pesukim must be out of order. To which the Gemara says, why do you say that? Whereas I would have thought just the opposite. If the Mishnah and the Pesukim don't match up, which perhaps is out of order? Which is out of order? The Mishnah. So the Gemara says, Umay chozis dimishabeshes kroi. Why do you assume that the Pesukim are messed up? Not messed up, are out of order, right? Shabish masnisa. Maybe it's the Mishnah. Amrabai, Amrakra, v'mishaleach v'hasoref. So we'll say, so the Pasuk speaks about the person who sends out the Sir La'azazel and the Soref, the one who burns the Sir La'Hashem. Ma Mishaleach the Me'ikara, just like the Mishaleach was done originally, was done beforehand, Af Soref the Me'ikara. So to the Soref that is mentioned in the Pasuk also means the Soref that was done before. Adrabah, Masoref tahashta, af mishaleach tahashta. I guess just the opposite, maybe just like the soref, right? The soref is being done now. So to the shiluach, the shiluach is also being done now. To which the Gemara says, "V'hamishaleach demeikara mashma." Because the lashon of hamishaleach, the one who sent away, that indicates something that was already done before. Rava Amar. Rava says, Amar Kra, the pasuk says, Ya'amod Chai. Rava says that this is talking about the Seir Asher Allah Hagora LaAzazel. This is the Seir LaAzazel, must be Ya'amod Chai. Ultimately, again, must be standing, must be alive. Ad Masai Yezokok LaAmod Chai. How long does the Seir LaAzazel have to remain alive? Ad Shas Kapara. Until Kapara, until atonement is achieved through the Seir LaAzazel. Through the Seir LaHashem. Ve'emasai Shas Kapara. And when is the Shas Kapara completed? B'Shas Matan Damim. From the time of the blood application, the Sulo. And ultimately, again, no longer after. We've actually spoken about this before. That Allah Lamaisa, we see something really fascinating by the Seir LaAzazel. Just as an aside, that the Seir LaAzazel has the ability to achieve atonement. But interestingly enough, the Seir LaAzazel, it appears, doesn't actually have to make it off the cliff in order to achieve atonement for Klal Yisrael. Right? We've seen a number of different things. We've seen that again, if the Seir LaAzazel makes it past the Gora, makes it past the lottery, according to some, you're good. Now we see another idea that as long as the Seir LaAzazel is alive, while the blood application of the Seir LaHashem takes place, that's enough. We saw 2 days ago on Shabbos, we saw that as long as the Seir LaAzazel is alive, once it gets to the desert, right? As long as it makes it to the desert, that's going to be enough. We'll say bottom line, take home message from the first part of this daf is that halacha l'maisa from this pasuk in on uba Aaron el moed, which is a pasuk that discusses Aaron going back into the Holy of Holies in order to retrieve the kaf and the machta. The avoda is written out of order. That's the idea to remember. And again, the order that we saw in the Mishnah, the order that we saw in Rabbi Akiva, that is the proper, yesterday's daf, that is the proper order of avoda. But when you go through the Chumash, again, from this pasuk in on, not everything is out of order, but there are a number of things that are out of order. Good. So let's go weiter. We'll see, by the way, I'll show you that we'll go through the Rambam, maybe we'll do it even tomorrow, Mirz Hashem. The Rambam, actually, in Parak Dalet, in Hilchos Avodos Yom Kippurim, in Seifim Aleph and Beis, really goes through all of the avodah. It actually will bring everything we do, everything we have learned, or bring it together in concise form. You'll see the entire timeline. So we'll say, so the Gemara goes weiter. Now this is interesting. The Gemara switches gears a little bit over here and gets to a really beautiful and overwhelming Gemara. Asi mishaleach. So we'll say, so now listen to this. So we're jumping back a little bit because remember again, we kind of closed out the topic of the Seir Mishaleach. So remember again, both say the last time we left off is the Ish Iti, right? The particular individual who was trusted with taking out the Seir. So what did he do? He pushed it over the cliff. What does he do after he goes ahead and pushes it over the cliff? Remember, what did he do? He goes back to the last hut and he stays there until when? Until after Yom Kippur. They will say, now look what the Gemara brings down over here. Asi Mishaleach. Now the Mishaleach comes back. They will say, now when does the Mishaleach, right, also known as the Ishiti, when does he come back? When does he come back? After Yom Kippur, right? That night. So sometime after Yom Kippur, the quote unquote the next day, if he meets up with the Kohen Gadol. Also listen to how beautiful this is. Asi Mishaleach, Matzo b'shuk l'Kohen Gadol. If he runs into the Kohen Gadol in the shuk, in the marketplace, Omer lo, he says to the Kohen Gadol, Ishi Kohen Gadol, Asinu shluchaseich. He says, Ishi Kohen Gadol, I executed your agency. Can you imagine this? Right? So sometime the next day, Isru Chag, right? So the Mishaleach finds the Kohen Gadol, he says, Kohen Gadol, I just want to let you know, I did my job. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Both sides, Rashi, 5 lines up from the bottom. Matzo b'shuk, mechado lifnei habrios, v'omer lo ishi Kohen Gadol. Supposed to listen to this. If the Mishaleach finds the Kohen Gadol in the marketplace, which is a public setting, he says to the Kohen Gadol, I executed your agency. Now Rashi points out over here, why is he saying to the Kohen Gadol, I executed your agency? It's not the Kohen Gadol's agency. Whose agency is it? Whose agency is it? The Ribbon Shalom's Klal Yisrael. So Rashi points out over here, it's his way of giving the Kohen Gadol covet. Since the shuk, since the marketplace is a public place, you give the Kohen Gadol, you give the office of the Kohen Gadol a bit more covet by telling the Kohen Gadol, I executed your agency. Listen to this. However, again, if the Ish Et goes ahead and meets up with the Kohen Gadol in the Kohen Gadol's home, I was supposed to say, home means what? Means what? Private place. There aren't other people around. He says to Kohen Gadol, Nechaye Chayim, he who gives life, we have performed his agency. It's interestingly enough, if he meets up with the Kohen Gadol in private, he says, Kohen Gadol, we performed HaKadosh Baruch Hu's agency. Look at Rashi. Nechaye Chayim, Hu HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Asinu Shlichu So. So we'll say, it's actually a very interesting descriptive term of the Ribono Shel Olam. Mechaye Chayim. Right? You've seen Mechaye Mesim. Right? Mechaye Chayim. He who gives living, or he who gives life to the living. So it's interesting, the Maharsha, when he comments on this, says as follows. He says, let me read it to you. He says, Ve'inyan mechaye chayim nir lefarish. He says, the ayidei maisezeh niskabru avonos beis Yisrael ve'akadosh baruch hu mechaye hachayim b'am shelo yavoli demisa. We'll say, what does tshuva do? Tshuva gives life to the living. Tshuva gives life to the living, right? Without tshuva, chas v'shalom, those who are alive may no longer be blessed with the gift of life. So therefore, the act of performing tshuva is an act of mechaye chayim, giving life to the living. So therefore, again, if he bumps into the Kohen Gadol in private, so he gives the covet to the Ribono Shel Olam, and he says, mechaye chayim, we have performed your shlichus. Quite beautiful. So the Gemara says as follows, which, by the way, if you think about it, is such a beautiful insight also into the process of tshuva. That what's tshuva? Tshuva is a way that you endow life to your life. It's a way that you endow living to your life. We'll say a person could be alive, but lav dafka that they're living. Right? A person could be alive, but lav dafka that they have meaning in their existence. The power of tshuva is that it's mechaye chayim. We're focused on the Ribbon Shalom's power in being a mechaye mesim. That's incredible. But sometimes even more incredible than being mechaye mesim is being mechaye chayim, is the ability to endow meaning to a life that is already being lived. Such an incredible yisod. In any event, the Gemara goes right to Rabba said, Ki miftri rabbana me'adadi be'pompadisa, when the rabbis in Pompadisa would take leave of one another, Amri Hachi, they would say as follows, Mechaye chayim yitain lecha chayim tovim va'arukim umitukanim. Jose, isn't that beautiful? So the rabbis of Pompadisa, when they would take leave of each other, right, they would wish each other shalom, so they would give each other the bracha, that literally mechaye chayim, he who gives life to the living should give you a long life, a good life, umitukanin. I will say this lashon of mitukanin is very interesting. What's mitukanin? Mitukanin means, right, an orderly life, a masudar life. Because I will say, what's one of the most, we've spoken about this before, one of the most important things a person could have in their life is a concept of seder, is a concept of order. Where there is order, there is productivity. Where there is chaos, there is often a lack of productivity. So they would bless each other. Listen to the bracha. So they would bless each other with a long life, a good life, and an orderly life. Because again, where there is order, where there is seder, that's where a person is able to fully maximize their existence. An incredible yisod. We'll say the Gemara quotes a bit more. This is so beautiful. Es halech lifnei Hashem ba'artzos hachayim. David HaMelech says in Tehillim, I will walk before Hashem in the land of the living. So we'll say, so just so you understand, the Gemara is bothered by this lashon. What do you mean ba'artzos hachayim? I'll walk before God in the land of the living, as opposed to what? I'll walk before God in the land of the dead. In other words, what does it mean? What is David HaMelech referring to? The land of the living. Well, so listen to this. Amar Rav Yehuda, ze makom shuakim. This refers to a place that has marketplaces. The shuk. It refers to a place that I will walk before God in a place that has marketplaces. So what does that mean? Take a look at Rashi. Ze makom shuakim. Rashi says, Sha'adam motze liknos mizonosav, ulefi shahaya David metaltel navinad hayim spal davar. But say, listen to how beautiful this is. David HaMelech davens to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ibanu Shel Olam. It's halech lifnei Hashem ba'artzos hachayim. Remember again, this is a supplication. This is David saying, Hashem, I hope to walk before you in the land of the living. What's called the land of a living, according to David HaMelech? It's a place with supermarkets, right? With shvakim, with marketplaces. David HaMelech spent a good number of years wandering and running and did not have the resources readily available to sustain himself. So David HaMelech said, you know what I want more than anything? Is halech lifnei Hashem ba'artzos hachayim. I'd love to lead a normal life where there's a supermarket, where there's a shuk, where I could buy food, where I'm not running day to day for my existence trying to figure out how I'm going to survive. People say, isn't that an incredible yesod? Isn't that an incredible yesod? There's sometimes we daven for such beautiful and meaningful and lofty big miracles, but yet we forget to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu and appreciate the simple, beautiful things that we have day in and day out. That you can go to a supermarket, that food is readily accessible, that the things that make daily living a bit comfortable are within my fingertips. Again, yes, there's plenty that's wrong, there's plenty that's broken, there's plenty that's not good, but look what David HaMelech davens for. As halech lifnei Hashem ba'artzos hachayim. And it was, here's what's incredible. People interpret this phrase in such like lofty spiritual ways. A life of spirituality, a life of holiness. And the Gemara says, what does David HaMelech want? He wants Machane Yehuda, right? Give me Machane Yehuda, give me Super Sol, right? Just give me a supermarket that what I need is readily accessible. And if you give me what I need in a readily accessible way, then life is good. I was saying, sometimes it's kedai to try to figure out how to become much simpler and low maintenance people who find happiness and find fulfillment in the little things in life that make life, little conveniences in life that make life just how much happier we would be if we found the joy in supermarkets, right? If we found the joy in the shuk. But that's what David HaMelech wants. Esalech lifnei Hashem bi'artzos hachayim. Ki orech yomim ushnos chayim. I will say what I do want to point out is, remember again, the Gemara says, why does David HaMelech appreciate the supermarket? Why does he appreciate the supermarket? Why? Because he didn't have it, right? Because he didn't have it. Because when you see, it's the unfortunate nature of the human condition that we tend to only appreciate things when we don't have them. Just like we tend to only really appreciate people when we don't have them as well. So here, again, David HaMelech appreciates the supermarket. Why? Because he didn't have it. Because he spent years running, trying to sustain himself. Incredible. So the Gemara goes right there. So also listen to this. So now he quotes the pasuk from Mishlei. Ki orech yamim ushnos chayim v'shalom yosifu l'cha. Literally again, longevity of days, ushnos chayim, and years of life he will add to you. So we'll say, so once again the Gemara is bothered by the chi yesh shanim shel chayim, the yesh shanim she'enan shel chayim. What does it mean when we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for shanim shnos chayim, years of life? In other words, I don't understand. Are there years of life and years not of life? In other words, once the pasuk is saying ki orchim, longevity of days, it could have just said shnos and years. Why does it have to say shnos chayim, years of life? So the Gemara is supposed to think how beautiful this is. Amar Belazar, this is along the same theme. Elu shnos of shel adam hamishapchos alav meira alatova. This refers to the years of a person's life where he went from a difficult situation to an easier situation. Difficult circumstances to good circumstances. We both say, what happens when a person goes from difficult circumstances to good circumstances? A new lease on life. A new lease on life. Shnos, that's called shnos chayim, where I feel that now my life has turned around. It feels like a brand new life. Look at Rashi. Shevis hapchos alav. Rashi gives an example. Misha haya ani bial duso. For example, let's say someone was poor in their youth. V'na'asa ashir, and then they became wealthy. Leis ziknu, so when they got older, domelo kilu achshav chai mitoch misa. It feels as if they've been brought back from the dead. So we'll say, so in Mishlei, Shalmelech is referring to orech yamim, longevity of days. Perhaps that could refer to someone whose life has always been good. Ushnos chayim. And sometimes some people experience a rebirth in life. And when do people experience a rebirth in life? When I have brand new circumstances. My circumstances were difficult. Now my circumstances are good. Halacha l'maisa. Now I feel like I was just reborn. So we'll say it's interesting. So these two pieces, remember this is father and son. Mishlei is Shlomo, Tehillim is David. So in Tehillim, David is saying, Es halech lifnei Hashem ba'artzos achayim. David HaMelech says, what I wouldn't give to walk in the land of the living supermarkets, a shuk. I appreciate now the little things in life. And then Shlomo says, Ki orech yamim ushnos chaim. When you go from adversity, ultimately again to deliverance, you feel like you have a new lease on life. We'll say, Rosie, you all experience this. You ever, whatever it may be, and sometimes it's even like very, very small things. Very small things. We'll say, I remember I was driving somewhere like a couple of weeks ago, and Mamsh out of nowhere, I got like a flat tire. And was stuck for a little while. And it's interesting, like when you have which is in the grand scheme of things is not exactly like an existential crisis of the human condition, but when it's happening, you begin to feel like a shtickle dejected, right? I wanted to get here, I wanted to get there, and then when that tire is working again, it sounds strange, but like you have a shtickle new lease on life, right? Like life is good. Like you realize, like. All those other times when I'm driving and everything is fine and I'm just getting from point A to point B, it's really good. It's really good. What's the problem? The problem is you feel that way for about like 7.3 minutes, right? And then you're right back to where you were before. And those type of things happen all of the time. I'm in like a difficult matzav, and difficult is relative, right? Then Baruch Hashem, I'm delivered from that matzav. I feel so good and feel so happy and so appreciative of little things. But then I kind of just launch back to my high maintenance level once again. And what David HaMelech and Shlomo HaMelech are saying is, if you could live life with a true appreciation of the little things and feel shnos chaim and feel like a new lease on life whenever those little things happen, you really live a happy life. That's the sort of happiness doesn't really come from the big things, but happiness comes from a profound appreciation of the little things which happen day in and day out. Incredible. The Gemara goes weiter. Aleichem ishim ekra. So we'll say the pasuk over here quotes once again from Mishlei. Aleichem ishim ekra. What does this mean? So the Gemara says, Amra brachya elu talmidei chachamim. Also listen to this. This refers to talmidei chachamim shedomin lenashim. Talmidei chachamim are like women. What does it mean? Talmidei chachamim are like women. Rashi says over here. Rashi says, anusnin v'teshushe koach. That sometimes the Talmid Chacham is a little bit weaker, physically weaker, like a woman. I will say, what does this mean? Sometimes Talmidei Chachamim are physically compromised, don't have the same vigor and vitality, ultimately because they're sitting in the base medrash the whole day. Yet, va'osin gevura ka'anoshim. But yet, they're able to go ahead and perform feats of spiritual strength, like men. So we'll say that's the Aleichem Ishim Ekra. So the Ishim, we'll say, so the Ishim over here is a little bit of a play on words, right? That the Talmid Chacham is sometimes like an Isha, sometimes like a woman, in that it could be in a little bit of a weakened state, but yet able to perform acts of vigor and strength like a man as well. What's a beautiful Gemara. What happens if today a person wants to go ahead and pour wine on the Mizbeach? But there's no Mizbeach. I don't yet have a Beis HaMikdash. So what should you do? Yimale gronam shel Talmidei Chachamim yayin. Fill the throats of Talmidei Chachamim with wine. With wine. Now, what does this mean? That if a person wants to go ahead and have the schos, ultimately of going ahead and offering up karbanos, support Talmidei Chachamim. So we'll say what that means is on a bigger level is that in the absence of the Beis HaMikdash, what keeps Klal Yisrael solidified and stable? Torah. The truth is, even with the Beis HaMikdash, it's Torah that keeps us solidified and stable. Balachas kama v'kama, in the absence of the Beis HaMikdash, it's Torah that keeps us solidified, stable, and grounded. So in the absence of the Beis HaMikdash, what should you do? Support Torah. Support Torah. That's what the Gemara means when it says, if you want to pour wine on the Mizbeach, what should you do? Pour wine down the throats of Talmidei Chachamim. Support Talmidei Chachamim, support Torah, and that'll lead to the stability of Klal Yisrael. So the Gemara goes weiter. V'amra Brachya says, Imroa Adam, sheTorah posakes mizaro. If a person sees that Torah is leaving his offspring, Yisa bas Talmud Chacham, he should marry the daughter of a Talmud Chacham. Also, we spoke about this before last week's shir about the power in Reb Tzadok, about the power of marrying the daughter of a Talmud Chacham, because a woman, a girl, absorbs the ruchnius of her home and is able to bring that to the new home that she is going to build. So literally translated, what this means is if a man sees that his children are going off the derech, he should marry the daughter of a Talmud Chacham. Shneimar, im yaskin ba'aretz sharsho uba'afar yamos giz'o. Literally, again, if his root becomes old in the earth and in the dirt, the trunk is dying. Amud beis, mariach mayim yefriach v'yase ketzir kimoneta. Literally, again, mariach mayim yefriach, from a whiff of the water, ultimately he will blossom. Va'asa ketzir kimoneta, and is his literally again, and the harvest will become from something that was properly planted. If you look at Rashi, mereach mayim b'nei Torah, supposed to say, so first of all, what does this mean? It's a strange Gemara. If a person sees that his children are going off the derech, he should marry a bas Talmud Chacham. So the Maharsha gives two explanations on this. The Maharsha says maybe it actually means that if a man sees that his children are going off the derech, maybe the woman that he's married to, right? Maybe that present husband and wife are not a good enough influence on the present children, and what? He should marry a second wife. That's possibility one. Maharsha says the other possibility is he should go ahead and make sure to marry off his children, right? So let's say he has a son who is not going down the right derech. He has a son, ultimately, again, who's not going ahead and making the right choices in life. Marry him off to the right kind of girl. Both say so again. It's reflecting of a different time when children listen to their parents about who to marry, right? And again, certainly about arranged marriages and things like that. But lamaisa, if a person sees that his child is not going down the right derech, so a person should make sure to marry off his child to someone who could provide the right type of influence. Which I both say, in general, such an incredibly profound yesod about who we marry, right? And this goes both ways, has a profound influence on the homes we build and the children we raise. And that again, this is a beautiful sentiment. How shaykh its application is in today's day and age is probably subject to some type of question, but ultimately, again, a person sees their child struggling. The ability of a parent to go ahead and influence who the child marries, to be a proper influence on that child. Again, I will say, different times. I don't know how implementable this particular Gemara is today, but at least it could be that when our children are young, and I will say, we know that so much of chinuch is the things that we do and we tell our children when they're young, and the ability to instill within children about what to look for in a prospective spouse is so incredibly important. And it does start even when children are young, right? To highlight, what are the important things? And again, parents often model this. What are the important things in a marriage? What are the important things in a home? What are the important qualities in a spouse? Those are the kind of things that, amazingly enough, you can instill within children, even from a very young age. But you see from here also an interesting idea that if a person is struggling, also it's interesting, if a person is struggling, sometimes the antidote to the struggle is marriage, interestingly enough, because the framework of marriage provides a level of stability that the single person may not enjoy. And that stability is sometimes what is ultimately necessary in order for a person to get themselves on the straight and narrow in life. Incredible Yitzhak say. The Gemara goes weiter. Another incredible story. The Yom Tov Haya Osela Oavos. Remember again, it's actually quoting the end of the Mishnah, right? Remember again, the end of the Mishnah was the Kohen Gadol would come out of the Kodesh HaKadosh. And after Yom Kippur, he would make a Yom Tov. He would make a celebration for all of his, for Oavav, for all those who loved him, the Krovram, for his relatives. So let's listen to this Gemara. Turn Rabbanon. One time, the particular Kohen Gadol. Now, interesting enough, the Gemara does not tell us who this was. The name of the Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol came out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. V'havu azlei kuli alma basrei. Now, both saying. Now, the image that's being highlighted is as follows: it's after Yom Kippur. the Kohen Gadol's come out of the Beis Hamikdash, not even after Yom Kippur, but it's after the Avodah of Yom Kippur. The Kohen Gadol is walking out of the Beis Hamikdash, and there's an entire entourage that is following him, which makes sense. Also, he must have been mobbed when he left the confines of the Beis Hamikdash to walk to his house. So a whole group of people walking with him. Kevan, the Chazinu, the Shmai v'Avtalion. Once the people saw Shmai and Avtalion, remember again, Shmai and Avtalion were the leaders, right? Remember again, we'll say there was a period of time, this is during Bayis Rishon, where again, the leadership model were zugos, pairs, right? So Shmai and Avtalion, remember Shmai and Avtalion are the Rebbe, or the Rebbeim of Hillel. So this is even before Hillel. And the people saw Shmai and Avtalion, Shavkua l'didei, va'azli basar Shmai v'Avtalion. Let's listen to this. So the people see Shmai and Avtalion, the Gedolei Hadar. What did they do? They left the Kohen Gadol and they went to Shmai and Avtalion. Well, so you can imagine the scene. So it's after Yom Kippur, or maybe it's even still during Yom Kippur. Kohen Gadol is leaving the Beis Hamikdash. The people are mobbing, they're flocking around the Kohen Gadol. Then they see Shmai and Avtalion. The group leaves the Kohen Gadol and they go to Shmai and Avtalion. L'sof asu Shmai v'Avtalion le'ifture minei de Kohen Gadol. So ultimately, again, I will say, then Shmai and Avtalion go to take leave of the Kohen Gadol. So they come to give shalom to the Kohen Gadol as well, to say goodbye, yashakayach, hatzlacha to the Kohen Gadol. So I'll say what happens. Amr lahen, the Kohen Gadol said to Shmai and Avtalion, Yasun b'nei amamin l'shalom. The sons of the Gentile nations should go to shalom. I will say Shmai and Avtalion were descendants of Gerim. Right? Remember again, Shmai and Avtalion, I will say, amazingly enough, were great grandsons of Sancheriv, the king of Ashur. Right? Sancheriv was the one who exiled the 10 tribes. Shmai and Avtalion were the children, were the descendants of converts. The Kohen Gadol was Breigis with Shmai and Avtalion. Why was he Breigis with them? Because he felt slighted by them. He felt, here, all the people are following me. Then you guys come along, the people go ahead and follow you. So he was Breigis with them. And he says to them, the sons of the nations, right? He says to them, he calls them sons, B'nai Amamin. So it was a shtach. It was a shtach. He was calling them the sons of Gerim. So he'll say, you should go in peace, sons of Gerim. Amr Luhu, we'll say, listen to this. So Shmai and Avtalion give Musa to the Kohen Gadol. They say, Amr Lei, Yasun B'nai Amamin l'shalom da'avdin uvda da'aron. Yes, the sons of the nations will go in peace because they conduct themselves in the manner of Aaron HaKohen. V'lo yaisi bar Aaron l'shalom delo avid uvda da'aron. But the son of Aaron should not go in peace, for he does not conduct himself in the ways of the Zayd and the ways of Aaron. So we'll say Shemai time give Musar back to the Kohen Gadol, because they say as follows. We'll say, look at Rashi, the avdi uvda the Aaron road fe shalom. We'll say, what was the essence of Aaron HaKohen? Aaron HaKohen was an oiv shalom, v'rodev shalom, oiv esabrios u'mekarvan l'Torah. Aaron HaKohen was a lover of peace, a pursuer of peace, a lover of people, and brought them back to Torah. So we'll say, so Shemai and Avtalion say to the Kohen Gadol, unfortunately, we resemble your Zayda more than you resemble your Zayda, right? Because the sons of the nations are more like Aaron, road face shalom, then ultimately, again, the son of Aaron himself, who unfortunately is not a road shalom. Look at Rashi, the law of it of the Aaron, shahonisa onas devarim. Because we'll say now, why did they say the Kohen Gadol was not a disciple of Aaron? Because we're supposed to remember again, the Kohen Gadol violated an Isser D'Oraisa. The Isser D'Oraisa says, Lo sonu ish es achiv. But say the concept of onas devarim. Onas devarim means you cannot say hurtful things to people. And one of the things that you're not supposed to do is to remind people of a not so glorious past. So you're never supposed to say to a person who converted, I remember when you were a guy? Remember when you were a guy? Tell me, how was the shellfish, right? Let's be honest, tell me, how was it? How was it, right? It must have been good being a guy, right? It must have been good. I would say people do this all the time, unknowingly, and not meant as a way to hurt. But the idea is, remember, everyone has things in their past that they're not exactly so proud of. We don't go ahead and remind people of whatever it is in their past. And again, I want to be clear, when a person converts, they have nothing to be embarrassed about in their past. They're like, fakir, just the opposite. Person makes an active decision to go ahead and join Klal Yisrael. It's incredible. But again, once you're a member of Klal Yisrael, a member of Klal Yisrael, if that person wants to speak about their past, they can do so. But it's not for me to bring that up. So ultimately, the fact that the Kohen Gadol brought up the fact that Shemayin of Tan were descendants from Gerim was fundamentally inappropriate. Now, maybe there were other people there also, but whether people there are not people there, it was fundamentally inappropriate. So ultimately, again, Shemayin of Talion say to the Kohen Gadol, unfortunately, again, we, yes, who are descended from the nations of the world, conduct ourselves more like Aaron than you, the actual descendant of Aaron. I will say, in incredible Moshe, it goes back to what we said before. I will say, say to yourself, 1 second, maybe wouldn't the proper midah might have been maybe to say nothing at all, right? Just to move on. I will say, we've learned this before, that sometimes it's better, again, just to be silent. We spoke about this in Reb Tzaddik as well, that you see that sometimes there is the need when you see something wrong occurring, there is a need to go ahead and step up and take a stand. I will say also remember again, Shemayin of Talion, their covet was not only their covet was the covet HaTorah. And for covet HaTorah, one is not permitted to be silent. For your personal honor, again, for my personal covet, that I could take a pass on. Fine, it's not going to say anything. But Shemayin of Talion, their covet is not their covet. Their covet is covet HaTorah. And when the covet HaTorah and the honor of Torah, which is the honor of God, is impugned, a person is actually obligated to step up and to say something. So they go ahead and they give Musar to the Kohen Gadol. I will say an incredible yisod. You also see from here that what? How important it is that every person, not just Kohanim, have to really be the embodiments of Aaron HaKohen. So we'll say, here's what's also amazing. Why did the Kohen Gadol say something? We have to go on. Why did the Kohen Gadol say something? Why did he say something? Right? He was hurt. See, I will say, a lot of times in life when people say mean things, they don't really mean the mean thing that they're saying. They're just acting out because they're hurt. Now again, that's not a license to do mean things, but it sometimes helps you understand a little bit of human behavior. People are good. People are really good at their core. And when they do things that are not good, it's often just because they're acting out because they're hurt. It's not a license, but it helps you to understand why good people do bad things. Mishnah. Kohen Gadol Mishamish Shona Kaleb. Both say the Kohen Gadol goes ahead and wears 8 garments when he's doing the avoda. V'hedyot ba'arba. And a Kohen Hedyot only wears 4. What are the 4? Ksones u'michnasayim. Right, literally again a tunic, pants, umitznefes, a hat, va'avneit, a belt. Most of Allah of Kohen Gadol, the Kohen Gadol wears additional garments. Choshen, most of the Choshen is the breastplate. Ephod is an apron. Me'il, a robe. Sitz, which is the head plate worn on the forehead of the Kohen Gadol. Be'elu nish'alin b'urim v'tumim. When the Kohen Gadol was wearing these things, he could ask, right? They are permitted to ask of the Urim V'Tumim. Also remember again, the Urim V'Tumim, the breastplate, has the 72-letter name of Hashem inserted in the fold. And it is there that they have the ability to consult the Ribono Shel Olam regarding certain things. Ve'in Nishalin, who is permitted to ask the Urim V'Tumim? Ela l'melech u'la'av beizun mishat tzibur tzorech lo. So we'll say, who's permitted to ask the Urim V'Tumim? In other words, who's permitted to consult God through the vehicle of the Urim V'Tumim? The king, the Av Beis Din, and someone who the tzibur needs. I will say, by the way, that last phrase is so profound. That isn't our goal in life to become someone who the tzibur needs. Right? I will say, right? That's my goal. I want to become someone, not important, als kavod, but I want to know that I am someone who the tzibur needs. Because if you are someone who the tzibur needs, then what? You're mamish like the melech, you're mamish like the Av Beis Din. It says the Gemara Tan Rabbanan, Tivarim Shenem Bar Bahen Sheish, Chutan Kafal Shish. This is an interesting idea. When the Torah uses the lashon of sheish, sheish means linen. We'll define that in just a moment. When the Torah uses lashon of sheish, sheish means something that is a thread made of 6 strings. It's a 6-string thread. Mashezar shmona. Mashezar means an 8-string thread. Me'il shnei masar. Me'il means a 12-string thread. Parochas esrim va'arba, 24-string thread. Choshen ve'ephod esrim u'shmona. Choshen and ephod ultimately is made of a 28-string thread. So let's analyze. Chutan kaful shisha minalan. But say, how do we know that ultimately again chutan kaful is 6-string thread? Where do we know that from? Damar Kra vayasu es hakisones sheish. Pasuk says they'll make the kisones sheish. Ves hamitznefes sheish. Ves parei migbaos sheish. Ves michnesi abad sheish mashazar. Chamisha Kraiksira. So the Torah mentions sheish 5 different times. What does that come to teach me? One time it mentions sheish is to teach me that it's made of linen. So one time sheish actually teaches me that these items are made of linen. V'chad sheichutan kafel shisha. One time is to teach me that the thread, the linen thread, one linen thread is actually made of what? 6 different strings. So the thread is made up of 6 different strings. V'chad l'shar bagadim. One is to apply this to different articles of Kohanim clothing as well. Shelo nemra b'hen sheish. V'chad la'akev. And one to teach you that this is an indispensable detail. So my mashma, the high shish kisnu. So I say, how do I know that sheish is linen? Or as well say, how do I know that sheish is? So we'll say, so there's 2 things happening over here. It's called sheish, right? Because again, each thread of linen is made of what? Is made of what? 6 different strings. But how do I know that sheish itself is linen? How do I know that? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, Damar Kra, bad. The pasuk says bad. Bad means linen. Davar ha'ovem and akarka bad bad. It refers to something that grows from the ground, stalk by stalk. Well, so remember again, now linen is made from what? Flax. The way you make linen is you beat flax, and flax comes up, grows out of the ground one stalk at a time. I ve'ema imra. Maybe it's referring to wool, because wool also grows from the sheep, one strand of wool at a time. In other words, it comes out one strand of wool. Amra, if tzule miftzal, so ultimately again, wool splinters, right? They're literally splinters. Kisna nami of tzule miftzal, but linen also splinters. Kisna agav lukisa miftzal. No, it's not true actually. When flax grows as a cohesive stalk. It's only once you beat it, right, then it becomes splintered pieces of linen. Ravina comes from here. Pa'ari pishtim yu al rosham, umichnes pishtim yu al masnehem. Amali Ravashi, I said the Gemara says so again, Yecheskel, so interestingly enough, the Rabbi Yecheskel says, Pari pishtim yu al rosham, they will wear hats of pishtim on their head, umichnes pishtim yu al masnehem, and pants of linen they'll wear on their flesh. So you see from here, Yecheskel is explicitly saying that what? That Allah Lamaisa, the big day kahuna are made of linen. To which the Gemara says, that's nice. So the Gemara says, Ravashi, Hamek Hamedas Yecheskel man amra. We'll say that's, and we'll say actually we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up in Mirat Hashem with Yecheskel tomorrow. So we'll say, so again, what comes out over here is that Allah Lamaisa, the big day kahuna are made of linen, right? Each strand of linen is made from 6 threads. From where we know that it's linen, the Gemara just quoted a pasuk from Yecheskel. The Shaila is going to become what? Before Yecheskel, where did we know it from? To be continued tomorrow. Shkar Chavosai.